in which growing maturity rekindles the relationship between one pair of lovers, and self-absorption carries another pair to the brink of death. Chapter 12. In the conversation begun about the rights of women, there were questions about the inequality of rights in marriage that it was ticklish to discuss in front of ladies. During dinner, Pestsov had taken a fling at these questions several times, but Sergei Ivanovitch and Stepan Arkadyevich had carefully deflected him. However, when they got up from the table and the ladies left, Pestsov did not follow them, but turned to Alexey Alexandrovitch and began to explain the main cause of the inequality. The inequality of spouses, in his opinion, consisted in the fact that the unfaithfulness of a wife and the unfaithfulness of a husband were punished unequally by the law and public opinion. Stepan Arkadyevich hastened to Alexey Alexandrovitch and offered him a cigar. "No, I don't smoke," Alexey Alexandrovitch replied calmly, and as if deliberately wishing to show that he was not afraid of the conversation, turned to Pestsov with a cold smile. "I suppose the grounds for such a view are in the very essence of things," he said, and was about to go to the drawing-room, but here Sorotsin suddenly spoke unexpectedly, addressing Alexey Alexandrovitch. "And have you heard about Pryachnikov?" Sorotsin said, animated by the champagne he had drunk, and having long waited for a chance to break the silence that oppressed him. "Vasya Pryachnikov," he said with a kindly smile of his moist and ruddy lips, mainly addressing the chief guest, Alexey Alexandrovitch. "I've just been told he fought a duel with Vitsky in Tver and killed him. As one always seems to bump, as if on purpose, precisely on a sore spot, so now Stepan Arkadyevich felt that, unluckily, the evening's conversation kept hitting Alexey Alexandrovitch on his sore spot. He again wanted to shield his brother-in-law, but Alexey Alexandrovitch himself asked with curiosity, "What did Pryachnikov fight the duel over?" His wife acted like a real man, challenged him and killed him. His wife. Alexey Alexandrovitch said indifferently, and raising his eyebrows, proceeded to the drawing-room. "I'm so glad you came," Dolly said to him with a frightened smile, meeting him in the anteroom. "I must talk with you. Let's sit down here." With the same indifferent expression produced by his raised eyebrows, Alexey Alexandrovitch sat down beside Darya Alexandrovna and smiled falsely. "The more so," he said, "as I too wanted to beg your pardon, and bowed at once. I must leave tomorrow." Darya Alexandrovna was firmly convinced of Anna's innocence, and she felt herself growing pale and her lips trembling with wrath at this cold, unfeeling man who so calmly intended to ruin her innocent friend. "Alexey Alexandrovitch," she said, looking into his eyes with desperate determination, "I asked you about Anna, and you didn't answer me. How is she?" "It seems she's well, Darya Alexandrovna," Alexey Alexandrovitch replied without looking at her. "Forgive me, Alexey Alexandrovitch, I have no right, but I love and respect Anna like a sister. I beg you, I entreat you to tell me what's wrong between you. What do you accuse her of?" Alexei Alexandrovich winced and, almost closing his eyes, bowed his head. I suppose your husband has told you the reasons why I consider it necessary to change my former relations with Anna Arkadyevna, he said, not looking in her eyes and glancing with displeasure at Sherbatsky, who was passing through the drawing room. I don't believe it. I don't. I can't believe it, said Dolly, clasping her bony hands before her with an energetic gesture. She got up quickly and placed her hand on Alexei Alexandrovich's sleeve. We'll be disturbed here. Please, let's go in there. Dolly's agitation affected Alexei Alexandrovich. He got up and obediently followed her to the schoolroom. They sat down at a table covered with oilcloth cut all over by penknives. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it, said Dolly, trying to catch his eyes, which avoided hers. It's impossible not to believe facts, Darya Alexandrovna, he said, stressing the word facts. But what has she done? Said Darya Alexandrovna. What precisely has she done? She has scorned her obligations and betrayed her husband. That is what she has done, he said. No, it can't be. No, for God's sake, you're mistaken, said Dolly, touching her temples with her hands and closing her eyes. Alexei Alexandrovich smiled coldly with his lips only, wishing to show her and himself the firmness of his conviction. But this ardent defense, though it did not shake him, rubbed salt into his wound. He spoke with increased animation. It is rather difficult to be mistaken when the wife herself announces it to her husband, announces that 8 years of life, and a son, that it was all a mistake and that she wants to live over again, he said, sniffing angrily. Anna and Weiss. I can't put the two together. I can't believe it. Darya Alexandrovna, he said, now looking straight into Dolly's kind, agitated face, and feeling that his tongue was involuntarily loosening. I would have paid dearly for doubt to be still possible. When I doubted, it was hard for me, but easier than now. When I doubted, there was hope, but now there is no hope, and even so I doubt everything. I doubt everything so much that I hate my own son, and sometimes do not believe that he is my son. I am very unhappy. He had no need to say it. Darya Alexandrovna understood it as soon as he looked into her face. She felt sorry for him, and her belief in her friend's innocence was shaken. Oh, it's terrible. Terrible. But is it really true that you decided on divorce? I've decided on the final measure. There's nothing else for me to do. Nothing to do. Nothing to do, she said with tears in her eyes. No, that's not so, she said. The terrible thing in this sort of grief is that, unlike anything else, a loss, a death, one cannot simply bear one's cross. Here one must act, he said, as if guessing her thought. One must get out of the humiliating position one has been put in. It is impossible to live as three. I understand that very well, said Dolly, and she bowed her head. She paused, thinking of herself, of her own family grief, and suddenly raised her head energetically and clasped her hands in a pleading gesture. But wait, you're a Christian. Think of her. What will become of her if you leave her? I have been thinking, Darya Alexandrovna, and thinking a great deal, Alexei Alexandrovich said. His face flushed in spots. His dull eyes looked straight at her. Darya Alexandrovna pitied him now with all her heart. That is what I did after she herself announced my disgrace to me. I left everything as it had been. I gave her the chance to reform. I tried to save her. And what? She did not fulfill the easiest of requirements, the observance of propriety. he said heatedly. It is possible to save a person who does not want to perish, but if the whole nature is so corrupt, so perverted, that perdition itself looks like salvation, what can be done? Anything, only not divorce, Darya Alexandrovna replied. But what is this anything? No, it's terrible. She'll be no one's wife. She'll be ruined. What can I do? Said Alexey Alexandrovitch, raising his shoulders and his eyebrows. The memory of his wife's last trespass vexed him so much that he again became cold, as at the beginning of their conversation. I thank you very much for your concern, but I must go, he said, getting up. No, wait. You mustn't ruin her. Wait, I'll tell you about myself. I was married, and my husband deceived me. Angry, jealous, I wanted to abandon everything. I myself wanted, but I came to my senses, and who saved me? Anna saved me, and so I live. My children are growing up. My husband comes back to the family. He feels he wasn't right, becomes purer, better, and I live. I forgave, and you must forgive. Alexey Alexandrovitch listened, but her words no longer affected him. In his soul there arose again all the anger of the day when he had decided on divorce. He shook himself and spoke in a shrill, loud voice. I cannot forgive. I do not want to, and I consider it unjust. I did everything for that woman, and she trampled everything in the mud that is so suitable to her. I am not a wicked man. I've never hated anyone, but her I hate with all the strength of my soul, and I cannot even forgive her because I hate her so much for all the evil she has done me, he said with tears of anger in his voice. Love those who hate you, Darya Alexandrovna whispered shamefacedly. Alexey Alexandrovitch smiled contemptuously. He had long known that, but it could not be applied in his case. Love those who hate you, but to love those you hate is impossible. Forgive me for having upset you. Everyone has enough grief of his own. And, having regained control of himself, Alexey Alexandrovitch calmly said goodbye and left. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.